Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of SportsSpeak Live, episode 143. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We have Rahill Jaiswal with us. We're recording this on the 2nd of August, which means the MLB trade deadline just passed. And let's just say it was not a good day for New York baseball for either team. We'll break it down, and going to be some frustration for me as a Met fan, and I know both of these Yankee fans as well. We'll look at some of the other winners and losers of the trade deadline as Major League Baseball really hits its end of season stretch, 2 months to go exactly until the wild card round. Also, our last episode, if you didn't check it out, Tim and I were together in person. We covered the NASCAR race at Pocono for Motorsports Today. It was a ton of fun. We had a great episode. We talked about Wawa. We talked about the Giants, the Eagles, everything in between. So if you missed that, it's available on YouTube. And of course, follow us on Twitter and check out our website, sports-speak.com. Sports-speak.com is where you can find more from us. But Tim, we have to address something first, because I posted some clips across socials about our comments with the Commanders and kind of mocking this team. And we're like, let's be honest, it doesn't really matter. They're clearly the worst team in the NFC East, which I'm doubling down on. They still are. The other three teams are much better than them. But a bunch of people are getting particularly upset by the fact that you said, I don't even know who their quarterback will be by this point in the season, or saying, why are you doubting Sam Howell? And this is coming from people who are Commanders fans and people who are not. To me, I think Sam Howell is a bit overblown. Maybe if he could turn out well, but I don't think you should be expecting him to play well. He had one good game against the Cowboys, who were crumbling at the end of the season and weren't really giving it their all in Week 18. What's your response to these people who are thinking you're doubting Sam Howell a bit too much?
First off, I think Kenny Pickett has a higher upside than Sam Howell does, and that's not saying much because I don't think Kenny Pickett's going to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. And to be quite frank with you, it's really coming from a standard that we have to remember. Washington over the last 3-4 seasons, I mean, think about how many quarterback injuries they've had. If you really do think about it, going all the way back to that unfortunate Alex Smith injury, this team has dealt with a lot of injury woes, and really health is a big concern. And my thing about Washington is you look at this team, it's always the picture's always centered around its defense. It feels like every year we talk about how good of a defense they have, right? But they never turn out to really be good. They always get hurt. They're always injury riddled. And you say the same thing about the offense. I mean, I remember at one point early last season, we thought Antonio Gibson was going to be a centerpiece for that offense. And then all of a sudden, what's his name? I'm sorry, the draft pick who got shot. I'm having a brain fart. I'm sorry. That's right.
I am too, but I know who you're talking about.
Is it Robinson?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm having a brain fart name, but he comes back, right, and he plays spectacular football, and it looks like they have a great running game. But what we're learning about the NFL this year, and this is another thing too, and I'm not going to take a shot at Bears fans, but I guess this is, Vegas is on something high, because the fact that you're telling me Justin Fields is considered an MVP favorite clearly must be a bunch of fantasy football nerds fantasizing over what they hope will be a good year, and hopefully that he doesn't get a leg injury. Because I am sorry, and this is going back to the point with Washington, I don't see how a one-dimensional offense could carry you to a positive season. I mean, and I'll say it like this, for example, the New York Giants last year, our team, right? Saquon Barkley, whether you like it or not, carried this offensive load. But what separates Daniel Jones from Sam Howell is the fact that Daniel Jones had positive passing numbers his rookie season. You could tell there's potential there. And the fact of the matter is that receiving core he had his rookie year was anywhere far better than what he's had over the last 2 to 3 seasons. What you look coming this year, I think is going to be equivalent, if not better, than the wide receiver core he had that first season. But when I look in Washington, I mean, outside of Terry McLaurin, the best wide receiver you could say that's come through that stable in the last 5-6 years in terms of constant NFL success has been Jamison Crowder. And that's not saying much. Jamison Crowder is what? Isn't he on the Giants now?
He's been all
So
over the place. He's
it's like,
he's
is he
not
on the
good. That's the
Giants
point.
now? So it's like, but it's like he's been everywhere. He played on the Jets last year. He's been everywhere under the sun. So it's like, to me, and that was the most successful Commanders receiver before Scary Terry. So just to me, I'm not scared by Washington. I'm sorry, folks, if you got upset that I don't feel they'll have an established quarterback, but injury woes are the big worry of that team. And again, I just genuinely don't think Sam Howell's that good, and that team needs a full-blown rebuild with or without Sam Howell to fix what is going on.
Here's my thought on the NFC East to keep it really simple. To me, the Giants have a great coach. The Cowboys have great talent. The Eagles have both those things, and the Commanders have neither of those things. I think that's easily how you can just simplify it right there. But let's go to baseball. We'll have much more football to talk about in a few weeks, and we are inside of a month from the SportsSpeak Fantasy Football Draft, September 1st. You're going to want to stay tuned for that for sure. But baseball, let's start with the Mets. And I just want to say this. I am wearing an Eagles shirt right now because I'm very happy because they are the only team that I root for that's not currently in a rebuild. In the last 7 months, as a fan of the Mets, the Nets, and Rutgers basketball, my teams have lost Jacob deGrom, Edwin Diaz's Achilles, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Paul Mulcahy, Cam Spencer. The list could go on and on and on. We've lost so much talent. And now the Mets have made a bold decision here to just straight up sell. Things were not going well for this team. And I just want to preface this by saying, I don't think Billy Epler did a terrible job with the moves that he made, especially in the second half of the moves. The David Robertson trade to me was atrocious. They got guys that are not going to be in the majors for years. One of them is a catcher. When you already have Francisco Alvarez, who's a stud, and your number one prospect is another catcher, you don't need any more catchers. You just don't. And you have Omar Narvaez under multiple years of team control. That one made no sense. David Robertson was like the best reliever on the market. I don't care if he's 38 years old. He was pitching to a 2 ERA. You traded him in division, you got nothing. That one was bad. But besides that, I don't think there's any other trade that you could say that Billy Epler did here that was necessarily bad. Justin Verlander, the Astros are the team that should be looking bad here because they could have easily signed Justin Verlander, re-signed him in the offseason. They didn't, by a difference of about $7 to $10 million in what they were offering versus what Steve Cohen was offering. What happens? They end up getting him back, but you have to give up your two of your 4 biggest prospects. 2 of them are big outfielders. For Scherzer, you get Acuna's brother. We know how good Ronald Acuna is. I'm pretty excited about what you can get from his younger brother.
Can I argue that case real quick? Because think about it like this. If Justin Verlander didn't have his injury woes at the start of the season and really didn't get off to that slow start, I'd argue if that he was pitching at Cy Young form for the Mets, like how he has really, to be honest, over his last 4, 5, 6 outings, I would argue his price would be so much more that the Mets would actually get a lot more value back towards getting Justin Verlander. So I know how you're saying about Houston, but I'd argue they don't really have to pay the full salary price to Justin Verlander. Yeah, they lose somebody, but let's be honest, that team is still primed to win another World Series. And they got, well, I guess he's technically not their ace anymore, because let's be honest, Framber Valdez is.
I mean, he just threw a no-hitter last night. So
exactly. But it's more the fact that they got their key centerpiece that just won Cy Young last season back again, and he's pitching elite baseball finally. I'm just saying overall, I feel like the Mets overall still are big losers, because had he had pitched well at the start of the season, I think they would have gotten far, far more for Justin Verlander.
But I mean, at this point, that's kind of a sunk cost here. Of course, you could have gotten more for Verlander if he had pitched the whole season well, but he didn't. So at least you got what you could, and you got 2 huge prospects, including Tyler Gilbert, who I think is going to be a stud in the majors and is not all that far away because he played college ball.
This is what I don't get under. This is what I don't understand from Steve Cohen's perspective. You have the biggest salary cap in baseball history, the top in the major leagues, and entirely of baseball, and you blow it up after a half a season. That's the thing to me that makes no sense. And the thing about Max Scherzer, what I would be pissed off about if I'm a Mets fan, 2026 is when we're looking to compete. That
Yeah.
doesn't sound like something Steve Cohen would say.
Well, yes, that's where we go from here, because Max Scherzer made those comments, and first of all, kind of weird to be airing out private conversations with the GM to the public, because the thing that I think should make Mets fans irate is Scherzer saying these things in a press conference, because guess who can hear that? Any player that would be thinking about signing there as a free agent, and then all of a sudden these conversations from behind closed doors become public. I've got a problem with that. But if that's all valid, that is the concerning part of this, because the Mets certainly have the roster to be able to contend. Some people have had down years. Of course, they're going to have to revamp their pitching rotation, but the lineup, most of them are under team control and or young. So you have a good foundation. And oh, by the way, most of that lineup that's still there was the lineup from the team that won 101 games last year. So I don't really buy that whole idea. I think they can still contend. Should they be expected to contend? I don't know, but I think they could still have the capability to next year, at least for a wild card spot. But Rahill, before I go into my further tangent, I want you to jump in. Should Mets fans be upset right now? Should they be happy with what they were able to get? What's your say?
I think a combination of both. I think obviously it's extremely disappointing that the fact they're already selling, considering you say it last year, they won 101 games. Half a season later, they're selling. But if we're looking at it completely objectively, the big knock on this team was, well, your two highest paid guys are 40 and older. Now you've gotten rid of them. I know they're two great pitchers, but I'm going to be completely honest. I think Max Scherzer is done. I personally think he's washed. I think he showed it last year in the playoffs. This whole year, he hasn't pitched well. The Verlander trade was a little more shocking to me because the last 6 starts, as you mentioned, Tim, he is starting to look like the Cy Young candidate again. But you got some really good pieces from Justin Verlander for the Verlander trade. You got the Astros' first and fourth best prospect. That is very good. So it's clear the Mets have a direction. So I understand where the frustration comes from because they've sort of been in that direction now for the past couple of years and nothing has come out of it. Now, and like I said, it's just not expected for them to go sell after they won 101 games last year. But in all, I don't think you can complain too much with the deals they've made. I think they're relatively solid. They've got some good young pieces, and they've got a couple guys that they can develop. So, and again, the 2026 comments, to be completely honest, I don't think that happened. I think Max Scherzer is completely BSing that. I really don't think that those things are actually said, just because to me, it doesn't make any sense, any logical sense whatsoever. So, but Mets fans, I mean, I understand why you're feeling a certain way, but all in all, I think you should be fine with most of the deals that were made at the deadline.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, with Scherzer, I mean, I know he pitched to a 2.3 ERA and all of that last year. His 2 most important starts, he was awful in for the Mets. So to complain about how this team didn't achieve what they were expected to do, that they underachieved, a big reason why they underachieved is because he did not perform in the big start against the Braves, and then more importantly, got absolutely teed off in game 1 against the Padres. Oh, by the way, at home. So, and then this year too, and I saw a tweet about this and I completely agree. The Mets have been very back and forth. They haven't been able to get momentum at all this year. A lot of the momentum killers have been, they've won a few straight games, and then Scherzer has an awful start. Verlander, to me, again, is a little more excusable because at least he missed the start of the season. He's still only a year and a half off of Tommy John surgery. He's older, and he was giving up less runs and less home runs, and he settled down. And as you said, he'd been consistent the last 6 weeks, which is why they were able to get as much as they did. And if only he had been available all season long, they probably would have gotten even more. So for the Mets, for me, here's my feeling. It's frustrating that it came to this, but this seems like the best solution right now to address things for the long term. I had questions from the beginning when they made these roster composition this year. You've essentially got your whole rotation. You've got 5 starters coming into the season. 4 of them are at least 35, and one's a rookie from Japan. There's like no really consistency and nothing you can really bank on. It's just crazy how quickly the turn of events are. Carlos Carrasco is the only starter left on the roster that was on the team last year. 4 of the 5 are gone. in the last year. They've had their best regular season in decades and now have gone into essentially a rebuild. Now, my thought process that I also have here is this. This should be the extent of your rebuilding move. You retooled your farm system. You made some good moves. Don't do anything crazy. And what I mean is do not in heck trade Pete Alonso this offseason. Do not do that. I've heard rumors about that. Do not
Trade him
do
to the
that.
Yankees. I would love him. No offense to Anthony Rizzo, but I'd love Pete Alonso to be a Yankee. That's the first step to a rebuild.
There is no reason to trade Pete Alonso at this point. Steve Cohen's got the money. Pay him. Shohei Ohtani is not signing here next season.
I was going to ask you that. How do you feel about Shohei now?
No, he's not coming to He's not going to either New York team.
No, he's going to the West. He's staying on the West Coast. He's either staying with the Angels, he's going to the Dodgers, or maybe Seattle. I think that's, and the Giants. Those are really.
What about San Francisco? I think San Francisco is a huge landing spot for him.
Yeah, he's not going to the Mets anymore. So that can be forgotten about. If they want to somehow at some point be able to make a splash, I think Juan Soto is the best option down the line, but that has to happen down the line. But the fact with that is this. You have the money this offseason that you're not going to be throwing at Shohei Ohtani. Your big expenditure this offseason should be to lock up Pete Alonso, because I know power hitters are expendable these days, but he is the cornerstone of this franchise right now. He's the best home run hitter besides Aaron Judge in baseball, and he stays more healthy than Aaron Judge. He's out there every single game. He's improved as a first baseman defensively throughout his 5-year tenure, and he's the heart and soul of this team. And to trade him away would be absolutely ridiculous. So as long as this is the extent of what the rebuild is, I'm satisfied with it. It's just frustrating with all of the promise of last year that it came to this. And this is why I said on this show back in October, to finish on the whole point, and then we'll go to the Yankees. The wild card loss last year, some people were saying, oh, this is just the start. No, it's not. Last year was your chance. You had a magical year. You didn't lose a series for the first 2.5 months of the season. Last year was your year to pounce. It ended up with, guess what? A team that wasn't even good the whole season making it out of the National League. It was wide open. The Dodgers were flawed and the Braves were flawed. That was your chance to strike and make a deep playoff run, and you failed to do so. Jacob deGrom is the only pitcher who showed up for them in that wild card series. And then what happens? This happens this year. So last year was your chance, and unfortunately, if you're the Mets, you blew it. But speaking of blowing it, the Yankees did not have the best deadline, and I think it's very predictable what happened here. So they didn't make any moves. I don't count Kenyon Middleton as a move. To be completely honest, the Mets' random trade for Phil Bickford may have been a better acquisition than anything the Yankees made, which is crazy to even think. And then, of course, you get the little explanation that happens annually from Brian Cashman that the real additions are the players who were injured who will now be coming back, who are pitchers, by the way. And to me, the pitching, with the exception of Carlos Rodon, has been just fine for the New York Yankees. It's the fact that they can't hit. So, guys, the floor is yours. I know there's things that need to be said.
I'm not going to a Yankee game until Brian Cashman's fired. I can't. I can't take this team anymore. I can't put my money into this team anymore.
I'm with you.
I can't. I'm sorry. The expenditure of going to watch the Yankees suck, even being above 500 to me, is frustrating. This team can't hit. And, I've been I think here on the show the last 3 years, I've been a very avid, I don't want to say emotional Yankee fan, but in regards to how my response about Brian Cashman is that I don't understand how we're watching some of the sport's top executives, top GMs, top coaches getting fired out of their jobs. And granted, I understand it's different sports, but 2 years, 3 years separated from a championship. Milwaukee Bucks, the most recent example. And the fact that Brian Cashman, just because he puts an above 500 baseball team on a baseball field every season since the 90s, for some reason can have a job in Major League Baseball, yet he's only legitimately had one World Series as a GM, and that's 2009. Again, I still emphasize the point, he didn't build Jeter, he didn't build that core four. That was pretty much handed to him once he got into his reign. Cashman is not a good dealer. Yeah, he goes and gets Garrett Cole and he does all this stuff in the offseason, but he is horrendous when it comes to trade deadline time. You're telling me there is not a single person, and Eddie, you read my article. You're telling me there's not a single person this team couldn't have gotten for decent value that could have bettered their bats? This team needs a left fielder. They needed a third baseman. Why couldn't we go get Candelario? Why? It makes no sense. Candelario's playing great defensively. He's a switch hitter. Yeah, he's not a long-term solution, but at least he can bat a 250 and 260. Giancarlo Stanton, listen, I'm a big G fan. I love Stanton to death. I hope he wins a World Series with the Yankees. But batting a Mendoza line average at this point in the season, I'm tired of hearing the excuses from Aaron Boone of, oh, they're going to turn it around. We made a trade for a hitting coach, got a new hitting coach, and what happened? Nothing's working. And I don't want to hear about impact. I don't want to hear about change. I don't want to hear about healthiness. Aaron Judge may be the captain of the New York Yankees, but I said it during the offseason, and I said it when I looked at this team on paper going into the season of why I am tired of complacency here in New York is because of the fact that when I look at this roster, this team couldn't hit in the big moment. And what happens now in a 162 game season for the first time in at least 15 years, this team couldn't hit a baseball off a tee. It is embarrassing. And it's so bad to the point where you have Stephen A. Smith on first take down in the Yankees. When did Stephen A. Smith ever talk about the New York Yankees? That's how you know it's bad.
Yeah, I think you summed it up right there pretty well. It's not going well. And
A pitcher. We needed bats. We talked about bats. We can't hit. What is a reliever going to do? We can't win a game when a team puts one run on the board because we can't hit. Jake Bowers is a joke. We have what's his name playing the outfield. I don't even know what his name is anymore. He's a utility player pretty much that shouldn't even be in the starting lineup. When you look at half of the Yankees starting order right now, half of them really belong in the minor leagues. Anthony Volpe hasn't worked out. That poor kid has been set up for failure. Absolute failure. So what is going on in New York? That's what I don't get. And I just wish if the boss was here, and I'll say it like this, and I never begged for Stein, but if Steinbrenner was here, he'd be losing his mind on how bad this organization is run. I can't understand this process by Brian Cashman. And you know, like the Joel Embiid joke, trust the process, trust the process. What is there to trust in New York? That we may go buy another good, heavy player this offseason? Even if the Yankees got Shohei Ohtani this offseason, which, as we just talked about, they won't. That won't win the Yankees a World Series. It really won't. It just won't. The Yankees need somebody who can bat a 270 plus. Yeah, if they have power, great. But everybody that did that over the last 3-4 years, they've aged now. They're not doing it. And that's the problem. The Yankees need somebody who can have a balanced bat, and there isn't that. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, guys, too. This will be the last thing I say about Durant. When we get to the offseason, you thought this trade deadline stank, and the only thing exciting was really the Mets selling superstars. I hate to say it, when we get to this free agency, there are not really good big difference makers to a team available in free agency. So you're going to be getting maybe at best a complimentary bat, but more often than not, those players will be sealed and staying where they are. So you're going to be stuck with utility players getting signed to a team.
yeah, the only position group that has a lot of free agents coming up this year are starting pitchers. And again, that's not really the thing the Yankees need to address. It's their lineup. Like, there's going to be a lot of those, but you think about, like, for example, the shortstops, they all locked up long-term deals this past offseason, and there's a lot of position groups that are in the same spot. So Tim had his rant. Rahill, the floor is yours at this point about the Yankees. How you feel about this team right now? Do they have any shot in these last 2 months? And how much of a blunder was this trade deadline truly for this organization?
Okay. I've taken my water, Eddie, so I have no having to cut out halfway through if you guys don't know what happened the last time I was on Sports Speak. But I'm with Tim here. And the main issue I have with this trade deadline is if you don't want to buy, that's okay. I was a firm believer this year in don't buy. This team is not worth buying for. But for you to sit on your hands and do absolutely nothing, you're telling me you have Harrison Bader on an expiring contract. You couldn't get anything for him? The Blue Jays, they looked at IKF. You couldn't get anything for him? Wandy Peralta out of the bullpen. You couldn't get nothing? Even Gleyber Torres. Are you going to sign Gleyber long-term? Is that the move? Because it doesn't look like it, so you might as well get rid of him now and get some stuff for him. You're telling me you couldn't get anything for a guy that's hitting around 245, 250, and at some point this year had a 16-game hit streak. I know we knock Gleyber Torres for his flaws, but he's probably been the Yankees' best player outside of Aaron Judge this year. You couldn't get anything for him? I mean, nothing. And if you really wanted to blow it up, you couldn't get anything for Michael King or Clay Holmes, two of the top relievers in the game. You sat and did nothing? What is the point in sitting here and doing nothing? There is no direct, at least the Mets have a direction. Their direction is we're going to sell and build. Why don't the Yankees do that? If you're not going to contend, sell some guys. That's really all you can do. I understand if you didn't want to go in and buy, spend an extreme amount of money, give up your remaining best prospects, whoever those are, because the Yankees don't really have a farm system for a team that's 3 games over 500. I get that. But the frustration comes in, why didn't you at least try and sell some guys? Build up some prospects. Maybe you can use them in a trade package later for a bigger superstar, or you can just try and develop these guys. But to sit here's how bad it is. Right before they made those 2 buzzer beater trades, and let's be honest, who the hell cares? Spencer Howard got opted to AAA today. That was your second move. Before they had made that, almost every single team in the MLB had made a trade since July 1st. The Yankees were the only ones who did it. And there was not even a rumor coming out. The only rumor was Margot, who the Rays are begging to get rid of. Dude's hitting like 230. That's all you could do at the trade deadline. And then we hear the same old excuses from Brian Cashman. Tim, how many times have we heard the injury excuse? I'm sick of it now. How many times? There's always 2 guaranteed excuses. It's the sign stealing, which I'm sick of, and it's the injury bug. I'm done. Because who is injured that is in the Yankees lineup now that Aaron Judge is back? Who is injured? Josh Donaldson. Was Josh Donaldson doing anything? Everybody was celebrating. Let's throw a party when he got hurt. Because it was like, all right, finally time. Oswaldo, it's Peraza's time. Josh Donaldson's career as a Yankee is done. And you're going to use that as an excuse? The only guy coming back from injuries, basically Nestor Cortez. And I love Nestor, but as you guys said, pitching is not the issue. It's the hitting. So I don't understand. It's the same thing every year. They do it. They always try to brainwash these fans into believing this year or the year coming is going to be different. And how many times does it take for the Yankees to realize it's not going to happen? How many times is this going to happen where us fans are going to get short shafted and screwed into paying over $150 for tickets to watch a mid-tier team put up 2 runs a game in Yankee Stadium? You think it's fair we're paying $8 for water?
And I'll make this argument.
Concessions, and Brian Cashman doesn't care because he's got his lovely home. He's made so much of money. He's going to go home like nothing matters to him. I'm sick of this. At the end of the season, there needs to be a clean sweep. Brian Cashman needs to go. Maybe Hal needs to send the team. Aaron Boone's going to go with him. And there needs to be a complete revamp of the system. It is absolutely putrid what has happened to this team. Because at least when they were losing in 2017, 2018, they were competing. Now you're looking at a team that's probably not going to finish above 500. And honestly, at this point, I welcome it. Because there's no way Brian Cashman keeps this job if the Yankees go below 500. I'm sick of this team. The only reason I'm wearing this Yankee shirt is because I'm going on a trip tomorrow and I don't have any other clothes. This is literally my last resort. I feel sick wearing this right now. All the Yankee memorabilia in my room, it's coming down because I feel like it's infecting me like a poison. You know, it's just a poison chalice. You know, there's some sort of bug, whenever this happens, something goes wrong. And it almost happened today. I almost got a really bad haircut today while I was wearing this.
I was going to say.
I am sick of it. I am done with this team until there are some serious moves made. Everybody boycott the games, boycott the jersey sales, and something needs to be done. I'm sick of
I
it.
was going to say,
I thought
this-
I'd be the frustrated one. I mean, my team's the one that's paying $200 million in dead money to players that don't even play for the team.
yeah,
And then you guys over.
this team, and that's what I was going to say, real. This team is, in my opinion, worse than when the Yankees were in 2013-14. And the worst part about it for Brian Cashman, he's saying this team is going to be a contender. He hasn't stopped saying that. And he said the Yankees are going to be buyers. The Yankees are going to be buyers. Then show it to me.
Well,
Show it to me.
It's not only that, there's no shame in selling. Look what happened in 2016 when the Yankees sold their guys. They sold Andrew Miller, they sold Aroldis Chapman, and they went on a run in 2016 toward the latter half of the year. The kids showed up, and then it led into 2017. Couldn't you do something similar like this at this deadline? Because we understand if you don't want to buy in, but you have to do something. You can't just sit there and watch the deadline go by. It was so bad, I forgot it was trade deadline day until the Verlander move happened. Because literally there was no rumors, nothing came out.
And I'll say one last thing in this regard too. My other issue with the Yankees is, and you remember back 2017, 2018, what made the Yankees building their team so enjoyable? It was the youth. It was the prospects not coming up through the system, but the fact it created value. But as time has gone on, what have we learned about the New York Yankees? And that honestly even goes back to before the era. The Yankees don't really do a good job of building a farm system. And what makes trading with the Yankees utterly so miserable, in my opinion, is why would you want some Yankees prospects or trade players and so on, knowing that, let's be honest, they're probably not really that valuable. All we've heard, and not because it's just the Yankees. I mean, we talked about Gleyber Torres being the next coming of an MVP candidate. All we heard, I mean, literally, when the Yankees signed Jason Dominguez before he even came to New York to do stuff, all I heard about is Jason Dominguez. He's going to be the next coming of Mike Trout. This guy's a superstar. And sure, he's got the speed, he's got the defense, he can steal. But what can he not do right now? He can't hit. He has power, but he can't hit for average. So realistically, put him in a Major League Baseball club. What is he not doing for the Yankees? He's not contributing outside of the long ball. What's the issue with Anthony Volpe? Oh, geez, what can he not do? Hit a 250 at minimal. He could steal. He could play great defense. But what can he not do? And as well as great power, but what can he not do? Bat for average. That is, I've been beaten into a bush for the last 5 seasons. That's why I love DJ LeMahieu, and it stinks to see the struggles he's having because he was a bat on ball hitter. That's what made him so valuable and the borderline MVP candidate for the New York Yankees. That's why I would have died. Absolutely would have died to see a guy like JD Martinez on the New York Yankees because even with the lack of defense, that bat is still there. And man, I hate that Stanton the last 2 seasons has been injury riddled because I would argue he was starting to get to his best point of a cusp of a 280, 290 kind of hitter before everything fell apart. But the Yankees simply can't hit. There's no answer. And if you don't sell, you're stuck with complacency. And I'm tired of these middle-aged players like Josh Donaldson that you come trade for that are past their primes and you're just looking at power numbers and that's it. Because power, I know everyone's like, oh, the long ball does win you games in the postseason, but has it won games for the New York Yankees? No. The Phillies last year, yeah, they didn't win the World Series, but what made them exciting was they were a very balanced offense when it came down to the nitty-gritty. They just weren't a good pitching staff. When I look at Houston, that team is balanced from top to bottom offensively, and there is nobody batting Mendoza line outside of the catcher position up and down that order. They know how to hit when it matters, and how many years in a row, Rahill, do we have to talk about this team being unable to hit with runners in scoring position, or at least the minimum moving a runner over from second with no outs? It's kind of, listen, I know it happens here in baseball here and there, but for the Yankees, it's the same thing every year, which is why I'm tired of the same message. Listen, I will always be a fan of this team. I will always support this team, but until something's different, if this team's in a World Series, maybe, and Brian Cashman proves me wrong, which he won't, or Brian Cashman is fired, you will not see me in Yankee Stadium spending my own money on tickets or anything because the team is a joke. The franchise is a joke right now, and they deserve to be treated like a joke by the fans.
Well, you guys put it right out there. It is a frustrating time in New York baseball for fans of both clubs at this point. We will continue with a new Zoom because we just spent a lot of time there, but there's more we got to talk about. We're going to continue with some other winners and losers of the trade deadline, and maybe the most bizarre moment of the day of involving Eduardo Rodriguez. So stay tuned for that here on Sports Speak Live. Well, we continue here on Sports Speak Live, powered by SeatGeek. Promo code SportsSpeak, one word, all caps, $20 off your first purchase. Eddie Kalegi, Tim Moore, Rahill Jaiswal. We've talked at length, maybe that's an understatement, about both the Mets and the Yankees. Let's talk about some of these other teams and who the winners and losers of the deadline are. I'll start. To me, two of the underrated winners are both teams from the state of Florida. The Rays got a starter who can go deep into games and has pitched in the playoffs before, Aaron Savali. I don't think he's great, but one of the reasons the Rays system has worked in the regular season and not the postseason is that they rely too much on their openers and their bullpen. And it's great to have a great pitching staff all around, but you need guys who can lock in and go deep into games. And it's pretty obvious you're going to be competing with the Houston Astros and Texas Rangers late in this year, who have arguably the two best starting rotations in baseball right now. So the Rays have bolstered that significantly with someone behind McClanahan, and a mix of McClanahan and Eflin and now Savali could be a very serviceable rotation. The Marlins, too, are going all in. As a Mets fan, I'm really worrying we're reaching a point where now the Marlins are going to be the random NL East team that makes the World Series, and we'll get Marlins Astros in the World Series because Miami made some big moves. They got Josh Bell from the Guardians. They bolstered their rotation as well. They bolstered that bullpen a little bit. They've just made some under the radar moves over the past month or so to make that team good. They've got a good mix. They've been playing good baseball all year. They're very young. They won that trade, getting Luis Arias for Pablo Lopez, and Sandy Alcantara, while he hasn't been what he was last year, could turn it on later in the year. They do have players in that roster with postseason experience. They did make the postseason in 2020. So I think both Florida teams did pretty well. In terms of the losers, the Reds did absolutely next to nothing. They got a reliever from the A's, and that's it. That is inexcusable at this point for a team that has so much in their farm system. We're also considering moving Jonathan India potentially for a pitcher because they have replacements for him because they're so deep. You've got to make a move. So the Reds, to me, are a big loser. The Pirates are becoming an embarrassment to the sport at this point because they just sell every single year and nobody stays on this team and they just sell them off automatically. I mean, the Pirates, again, get rid of a bunch of pieces here at the deadline. They make the trade with the Padres. They trade away Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi. It's like this team is never going to stick with anybody. They had some chemistry. They weren't going to win the division, but the Pirates have just been non-competitive now for a full decade. At least even the Oakland A's have had some competitive years, and the Orioles and the Reds in that span. The Pirates have not been good since Garrett Cole started for them in a couple of wild card games about a decade ago. So they're in big trouble. And the weird situation to me that maybe we'll start with here, Rahill, is what happened with Eduardo Rodriguez, because he had the opportunity to go to the Dodgers, pitch for a competitive team that's going to be playing postseason baseball, and only go there for 2 months to really nice weather. And guess what? If he doesn't like it, he'd have the chance to go right back to Detroit and play there next year because he's a free agent. But instead, he exercises his no trade clause. There's been a lot of weird things that have happened with Rodriguez, both injuries, health issues, kind of an unexplained absence from the team last year. But to me, this just makes no sense. You could bet on yourself for 2 months to go to the Dodgers, not have that much pressure, join that team, and have a chance to play postseason baseball. And if you like Detroit so bad, go back and sign there next year. So to me, that's the most puzzling one. Give me some of your winners and losers from this deadline, beyond, of course, the two teams from New York.
I would say a winner would definitely be the Texas Rangers. I know they only got Scherzer, but they also added Jordan Montgomery. Ever since leaving the Yankees, has been an unbelievable piece. He was great with the Cardinals. I think he can really help the rotation. And also, keep in mind, they had some pretty good pickups. They picked up Aroldis Chapman. He's actually looked pretty good so far this year. He looked like he's got his stuff back. Chris
Chris Stratton, another reliever that's pretty good as well. And you're hoping at least Max Scherzer can channel some of his inner, get his form back for a little bit, just to sort of just to sort of give you solid rotation minutes. I don't think he needs to be the ace in that rotation. Some losers at the deadline. I think another one would be the Boston Red Sox. A lot of people thought, similar to the Yankees, they're kind of on the verge in the playoff contention. 3 games out, really did nothing. Made one trade, and that was really all. Didn't really address much of their needs whatsoever. So I think the Boston Red Sox were definitely a loser in this trade deadline as well. I expected a lot more from them. I know you got Trevor Story coming back soon, which will help, but a lot of people expected the Red Sox to make some definite moves that would help bolster their roster because they're in a much better position. I mean, it's them, the Angels, and the Yankees and the Mariners who are all chasing that last wildcard spot at 3 games back. Yankees didn't get any better at the deadline. Angels kind of got better with Lucas Giolito. Mariners didn't really do much. Red Sox had the opportunity to kind of push themselves above those other teams, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The AL East, it seems like we know the Yankees. The Orioles didn't do a ton, which kind of surprised me, but I have confidence in Baltimore because they have the prospects to have a multi-year plan. The Reds I worry about a little more because they don't have that much financial stability, and they've proven in recent years to sell off pieces pretty quickly. So the Reds concern me not making a move. Baltimore being kind of quiet. Jack Flaherty to me doesn't really mean anything. I don't think Jack Flaherty is that good. But the Orioles, I don't think it's much of a worry, but it kind of goes the AL East. Toronto was the most active team. Nobody else really made any substantial moves. I mean, it was kind of a seller's market. It was kind of a quiet trade deadline, as Tim's alluded to. And Tim, to you, who do you see as the big winners and losers here from this past few days?
To be honest with you, I really do think, and granted, by the way, Lucas Giolito got absolutely rocked today in his first Angels start. But I would actually argue that really the Angels making a little bit of a statement saying that they're committed to buying and committed without Mike Trout to making this team a playoff team and saying they're not selling Shohei Ohtani, to me, was a big statement because the team actually proved it for once that they were worthy of keeping Shohei Ohtani. When I look at it though, I mean, still for me, you mentioned Miami. I loved every move the Miami Marlins made. I felt that team has really progressed itself nicely. Maybe not exactly still to be a title contender, but really produce some development that not only you have to think about from this season, but beyond this season, that they've really made some moves for. But I mean, it's tough because, I still think the team that by far won the deadline is the team that got Justin Verlander. That's Houston. Houston is scary to me. They won't stop being scary, unfortunately. And this team, doesn't matter who they lose, they still have young talent. They find ways to produce. And the fact that they got their pitching staff better, I think the Astros, again, got to be World Series favorites down the AL. Through this whole process, despite a slow start. But I think that wild card is going to be very interesting. I do agree with Rahill as well. I'm a little bit upset by Boston not really making many moves to help that pitching staff on the rotation side. And really, to be honest with you, one thing about Boston in past seasons, not as much this season, that we've talked about that team really being good is that, they've been centered around their offense, and they're still decent offense, but not as much in the past, since they've lost JD Martinez. So I think that this team could have done a little bit more. But overall, moving forward, I think that, this is going to be a very interesting not even second half, last 50 game stretch, last month and a half of the season or 2 months of the season. I just don't know what to say about World Series, though, because with there not really being a big buyer deadline, I guess you could say, as you mentioned too, it's more of a sellers, not really big difference makers of players. I just don't really think a lot of the teams that made big moves outside of the Astros really bettered themselves and put themselves in a position to win the World Series. So I really do think that we sit in a position right now where the top teams you see in baseball, without a doubt, should be the favorites going to the World Series, and arguably, I would say probably the likeliest of teams to make the World Series this year.
It's funny, the Braves also did like next to nothing, but it doesn't really matter because they're just worlds ahead of the entire rest of the National League. Rahill, last baseball topic, and then we'll finish with something else with Tim. The San Diego Padres, there were rumors that maybe they'd sell some pieces, which to me would have been crazy with how much they bought. And that would have been the third time they've experimented with AJ Preller bringing in a bunch of money and then breaking it up. I mean, they did make it to the NLCS last year, have disappointed a bit this year, but opted not to do that. They stood pat and even added a little, got Rich Hill and G-Man Choi from Pittsburgh. Both of them have played in the postseason and played deep into the playoffs before. What do you like or dislike about the Padres' approach? And do you think this team has any chance of putting it together over the last 2 months and sneaking into a wild card spot?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I would normally say yes, because Rich Hill has postseason experience. As you mentioned, G-Man Choi played in the World Series with the Tampa Bay Rays. But also, man, I mean, can you really trust the Padres? They have so much talent, maybe all the talent in the world. Manny Machado, Juan Soto, all these guys. And for some reason, they can just Blake Snell, who, might I mind you, is leading the major leagues in an with an ERA of like 2.3 this year. He has revitalized that Tampa Bay Blake Snell form. And for some reason, they just can't put it together. So while the moves look pretty, the moves are good moves on paper, and it helps their lineup, just given the way the Padres have been performing, I can't really say it's going to turn their season around, because I haven't seen sort of any sort of catalyst movement. Maybe does Rich Hill, I don't really know if he changes your life. Same thing with G-Man Choi. He's a nice addition to a lineup, certainly an upgrade over Josh Bell, who was really struggling. But I don't know, because the Padres have been so disappointing. It's almost like, to me, they can make every move in the world, and I still wouldn't believe in them, because I believed them at the start of the season, and look where that's gotten me now. So they could literally make every move in the world, Eddie, and I still wouldn't believe that they would do something, because it's been so bad this year.
Yeah, Tim, let's finish with this quick NASCAR topic, because of course, if you missed it, Adam Tropper, Tim Moore, and I, we were at Pocono Raceway for a whole NASCAR weekend. It was really a blast. We covered so much. We got to talk to so many drivers. Motorsports Today, also under our umbrella, as is the Totally Goated podcast. You can find that again at the website, sports-speak.com. Quick NASCAR news to touch on before we end the show. Corey LaJoie announcing on his podcast he's re-signed with Spire, an extension for, quote, more than a couple of years. So I take that as 3+ years. So this is a long-term extension, it appears, for LaJoie. And in some ways I kind of feel bad, because I feel like the market kind of judged him off of one race. But when you get a chance to race for Hendrick and replace Chase Elliott for a race, and you're getting outrun by a Truck Series driver on your own equipment, that's a big time missed opportunity. And I think LaJoie saw stability here, saw not that many open rides coming up, specifically in the Chevy camp. So to me, I think this is really the only move he could make.
Well, I'd also argue this, that granted, he's not a playoff contender this year. I'd argue this team has made leaps and strides, with the 7 car in particular, as compared to last season and the season prior with him in a Gen 6. Really, when you think about 2 years ago, the only time you really saw Corey LaJoie relevant outside of Daytona was, a couple road course races where he was really relatively established. Now you see him up in front, of course, at tracks like Atlanta regularly, and still in super speedways, but that team has really solidly put together a lot of top 15, 20 runs this year. And initially, you see, I thought this was official weeks ago. So to me, this was a surprise when it got announced today, because when I had last read upon this, they were talking about a 4-year extension for Corey LaJoie. And there's still the rumors and speculations, for example, I know they're talking about maybe Andretti, or if maybe they even are already, Andretti getting involved with this group especially. So my thing is, knowing from that knowledge, with regarding the Andrettis, it always tends to be a desire to have a 2-car team. And if you need to secure, I don't want to say your biggest talent, because of course Carson Hocevar down below, I would argue right now is your biggest talent, but to secure at least somebody that's producing you success in the Cup Series, I think is the first step. And again, just like how I'll make the argument about Ricky Stenhouse, for example, who's having a great year, he's going to make the playoffs, right? Why would you want to leave JTG to go join Stewart Haas or another big team that has a spot open potentially, right? When you're having more success than those other programs. I feel that Spire is slowly starting to develop themselves to get to that success. And by the time they get Carson Hocevar in the Cup Series in the 77, I think that team overall will be a pretty solid mid-tier team. But right now, I mean, it's a one-car team you think about on paper because Ty Dillon, let's be honest, has done next to nothing in the Cup Series. So I think they need to make sure that they had an established driver moving forward. And what a good move for them. And I think it's a good move for the sport because, let's be honest, free agency already. I mean, again, that's my frustration with NASCAR. Silly season doesn't really exist. Justin Haley made the most shocking move of the offseason that nobody expected. And we know it halfway through the season pretty much. So it's like coming to the offseason outside of maybe MTJ retiring, which again, that's 50-50. Don't know what's going to happen. I don't really think we're going to see much shocking signing news moving forward. But this is definitely a good first step and a good re-sign for Spire.
Yeah, good stuff for them for sure. And that'll just about do it for this episode. Rahill, we appreciate you joining. I still don't understand. So your shirt almost caused you to have a bad haircut today? And you're like muted, so now we're just watching you waffle away.
When I was in the chair, I almost got cut, and I'm blaming it now on the shirt because the shirt is bad luck. I'm convinced that the shirt is the reason that happened.
So you almost got cut by your own barber?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. But you know what? Maybe it was the shirt. We don't know.
It is. Trust me, it definitely was a shirt. I will not be wearing this for a long time.
And I do want to say one more thing not related to that because I mentioned it when we first joined back in the call in between. For you Commanders fans that by the way, critical in question, I went back and I did my history research. I just want to gladly let you know you haven't had a single quarterback in a season play all season for you since 2017, and that guy was Kirk Cousins. So I'll just let you know that's another reason why, again, I mentioned health. It's been that long. It's been 6 years since you've had one single quarterback play a full season. What a joke.
Left hand up. Who are we? The Command. I mean, they got the greatest.
No, they may not be that name. They may not be.
I know.
Honestly,
I
go
feel
back
so
to football
bad.
team. Go back to football team.
They should. Just do like a whole like reverse. It's gonna be like a horse.
What was it? Was it Pat McAfee that wanted them to do like the Huguenots or something? It was like something crazy.
Yeah, they could have just gone from Redskins to Red Wolves. They could have kept the same idea. It would have made sense. Same syllables,
Right.
Same first three letters. But no, you go to the football team and then you go to the Commanders, which makes sense.
The football team. I low-key vibed with the football team at the end.
And they were pretty good when they were the football team. I mean,
yeah, they won the division, but they were like 7-9.
Yeah, and Nate Sudfeld helped that happen.
Yeah. What a good year to be in the NFL. Joe Judge, great coach. Good offensive coordinator along with Matt Patricia.
What an era. And we're in August, so football's starting soon. NFL, college football, our draft's about a month away, so we're gonna have plenty of football coverage to get to in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. And oh, by the way, I mean, NBA kind of a dead period right now. Is Damian Lillard ever going to get traded? I guess James Harden staying with the Sixers. We got to talk about that at some point, but we'll save that for a future episode. But until next time, that's going to do it here for Sports Speak. Again, follow us on Twitter. We're also on TikTok now at Sports Speak. Promo code again on SeatGeek, Sports Speak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase at checkout. But until next time, signing off, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
And we're all done here on Sports Speak. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you in a few days.